Matamda. Do it, figure do it. Do it. Not the way. Lima. Watch and see me. It is stuff. Oh, today you are. This. Yeah. You part do it well. And do it. Take a survey. And do it. Do it. Just. No chance to do it. Down lost. Sit down lost. That did it. Do it. I did. I do session again. There's session, dude. And indication. Session comment. Do that. I'll do it. This. What did that? I never see your kid. Those two. Ready?
We're ready? Are you
Yes,
ready?
we are ready.
Okay.
This one, what else is it?
Good morning again, Rinpoche. Thank you for your precious teachings. And good morning, Katrina. Thank you for your clear translations, and welcome everybody. Please note that this is our last class in this series, but Geshe has kindly agreed to continue teaching on the Rice Seedling Sutra in May, first week of May. So keep an eye on our website for the dates and the times. And you can find information about making an offering in gratitude for the teachings in the chat box. And please May your offerings arrive no later than March 8th. Thank you. So we'll begin with some preliminary prayers. Again, the link for the prayers is in the chat box. To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one thus gone, the foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one not the bliss, nor the world's supreme guide to beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you pay 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop, a dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the foe faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, Orland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Tiriyat. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Ja, diksången.
Ja. Och det är 강게 투지 니르송네 따와 탐제 뻔비실 담배치는 던제가 고담텔라 차차로
Recording in progress.
야 네 가서 당연하죠 가서래 최초발이야 튕기 개개 상마다 제 튕기 상마 차denge게 밀리토베 건데 라스요라 되는 저 신딜레 대와다 김만 펜젤이야 펜베 최시자고요라 뒤가서 그랬으나 신딜레 대와다 김만 펜젤 김만 예선을 매제 라다 밀리게 달이야 아니 또 줘발라 써봐 령아 예수님 지고네 샤라 체외 리스큐바데 빠 니소 줘발라 써봐 샤라 펜베 리치니 주베 어디다트 최세요라 최세도 되나 샤라 차와 방바다 펜바 주바니나 되비라 뒤에고 차와 방바들라 달아 망부시오라 펜바 주바들라 자치슈 망부시오라 진짜 치자고요라 뒤인데 치마 펜바 주에 치마 펜젤라 펜델라 와다 치마 펜젤 수들이야 니 기부 충원되시나 예선레 타네 하다 메고바 주게 답디로와 다트네 기분 되더시나 딜레야 삼르체 토안로서나 아니 하다 밀레케나야 예선레 때데 와상 못된 루레데 메 하다 밀라야 동해 망부치와라 가르스 레다 녀모베 샤마도 쳔네 기치 세우요다 풍분도레 세우요다 어디서도 대한 동해지랑 시전도 텔레타베치도 코알 레다 녀모베와게 코알 라와메바 기치 체고바 텔레타베치도 이 대주의도 다든 제바스랑 하죠 아반제바 다든 제바스라 그다 뒤에 탐제 메타바 송도 이제 그 메타바 삼을 당고요 그래 이제 사실 탐제 동야와 삼을 당고요 그래 근데 다음에가 삼을 당고요 그래 이 삼을 당하에나 근데 동야기 주때 봐 걔네 타로토베 줄도요라 어디 단다 타로토베 줄이야 나게다 kondomage nyomo 차돈 드레심을 써봐 nyomo 메심디까 nyomo 메시 니리니리 메시나 쳇도에나 타로토베 줄도요라 오야 어때 라치부 타로토바 마이바 심지어 탐제 라 고에 동엘에 타로체고요산 심지어 탐제 라다 남베 최신의 교황아마데 탐메바를 심마되고 남식이 근데 좋아요 말아 어디에도 자천부 삼다고라 이 삼다도네 교황아마 남서라라 진시와 마주베 아만년들라 소고 마주에 심지어 매를 단도 소소 기집표는 뭐 마신 것마도 어디인데 라라 진시에 심지어 삼만 탐제 고해 동엘에 타로치 동계시지 고요삼 대체도 안에 딱배 시행집에 장주고 셈 림베 삼루탄에 소소레 타바 예심제 리스마시베 개발은 매봐 대주 단체바 제토바치 제고요삼 대체도 라니 교육고세 연대 군대기 기부시도 산제지 고바스네 교육고세 연대 군대기 기부시도 주로차삼 대규르제게니 탑텔이야 터바다 삼바 공배 주고 인삼 담부터 바체 터바 삼을 마셔 소소 삼로다 시바체 시에서는 야네 야도 공부할 때네 대답이 산지지 고반지 터버리죠 아님 대체도 최년기 인삼 셈버쇼시야 뭐 도체스 뜻이 랍션데 그래
Mm. So here to begin with, so there's the prostration to Shakyamuni Buddha, he who in his compassionate wisdom taught dependent origination for the pacifying of all views. To Gautama I bow. So here we should begin by thinking about the sort of motivation that we have. Right now, we have all of the kinds of conducive conditions to be able to practice the Dharma. So we shouldn't just use this life for just the affairs of this life, but rather we should use what we have in this life to be able to affect a benefit both in this life, but also in the future, gaining a good rebirth as a human or a god. And so with that kind of thought, one engages in the practice of dharma, that really being essentially abandoning any kind of harm with body, speech, and mind, both directly and indirectly, and engage in activities that are beneficial to others in order to secure a good rebirth in the future as a human or a god. And that will also bring about kind of good in this life. But sort of lifting one's motivation up beyond that, if you think about it, even a rebirth as a human or a god is still within the nature of suffering. One is still taking rebirth uncontrolled in samsara, under the control of our karma and afflictions. And so in order to pass beyond that suffering nature of samsara, one needs to contemplate how that comes about. It's really this self-grasping attitude, and thereby contemplating concepts like impermanence, that all composite phenomena are impermanent and in the nature of suffering, and how they are selfless and so forth, that one is able to remove those causes of suffering and act toward gaining liberation. So on a daily basis, you're striving to reduce those kinds of afflictive emotions, pride and jealousy and anger and attachment and so forth, in order to gain that kind of freedom from this suffering nature of samsara. But it's not just you who is in this kind of suffering situation, but rather it's all sentient beings. And here Buddhism asks us to take a really long-ranging view, in that there is no beginning to the continuum of our consciousness. And therefore, we have had countless beings act kindly toward us. We actually can't point to a single being who has not acted kindly, shown us the kindness of a mother. And thereby, we wish to be able to bring about their happiness as well, repay that kind of kindness, and thereby developing a sort of attitude of bodhicitta that cherishes others more than oneself, and an attitude that is not biased or partial, just thinking about some, but encompassing all sentient beings. We think, I'm going to attain this state of Buddhahood, wherein I've removed all faults and developed all good qualities in order to benefit all of these sentient beings. And in order to achieve that, we have to first listen to the Dharma, and listening isn't good enough. We also need to contemplate that. And having come to some kind of understanding through contemplation, we need to meditate on it again and again. And so in this way, we should set our proper motivation for listening to these teachings.
Oh yeah, I'm going to delete you. Number 마제버 때문에 딱 받침을 줘 봐세. 어떤 가지고 되는 마셔야돼 동반이 거를 세요라. 최상마랑다 최상마 탐제데 내다 간데지레 생활아도 통하나시 따다레 통하나시 템바 마레베 가리 통하데 템바레 가리 통하데 메덴바레 이세요라. 동반이 세요라. 최근 내주려 말아도 삼을 당당 통대 최도도 삼을 당당다 난당다 될 때는 아주 주고요라 노르고요라 삼을 당당데 양당 받치다 와시 여배네 아니고 노래게요 말도 최근 내루데 하고요라 소송원에 내단데 거래 최강게 내단데 문에도 거래 가라도 따디 컨디스다고요라 가라도 통디 컨디스 통고요라 이와 십시 차와시네 예와치요라 ini kali-kali nganjuk kombache toma mebane komdega norte batuzo kali-kali be yane yando komba nyuruta yangda bade yane yando kombala tene ne semji kyanga dagi cherwa semji yane kanga sandu de ne lunga la yan juran dubi ne kyawayina ko saru siya ende rogo yordo o tisito chönamki yisude tene takwatsam shawore Rangune yobachi tongyorati na shirvesti kolshegora. Yeah.
So, as for where we have arrived in the text, on the in English, we are on the page 76, where we're at this topic of establishing phenomena not through analysis, but on the basis of mere dependent imputation. So here we're talking about emptiness. It's explaining emptiness, and this really means sort of coming to an understanding of, one could say, like the ontological status or the abiding nature of things. Is the way that we see them and perceive them the way that they actually exist? Do they have the kind of existence that appears to us? And when we come to understand that we're mistaken, we're deluded about this, we need to then investigate in order to come to a correct understanding. And when we investigate and analyze carefully and in detail, we can come to understand the way that things actually are. And we can come to develop the kind of wisdom that is correct about the way that they abide. And then through developing that sort of understanding, repeatedly meditating on it, our speech and our actions will change as well. So this is what we are talking about here.
Oh yeah, they. To the matter to Samuel Tannerwa. I'm a rather minute in the Samuel Getangamarwa. So carry so in a tenacious message, Sendikanya, and the dwellers, Timato Samuel Getangamarwa. To the mouth of Yamatini, Kongame made to Hello de Hora. The son as it tells Sabu Samuel Kuga Mega to the Mega Sodit in the Mara. I called it goes some Mamuta condition, young girl, and Zambulin condition to go. Me to Menda condition go there. Oh, Tinning around to Tonju Cadedo to the Tachiora. Oh, teach you doing the Mambuchiga. Oh, Nga said Narazulo Legend and Nga said the Tawada Tembo Yakuja Tabuchi and some such ora. Oh, today some of the old Taz said the Tawa Tembashi. You go to Samsa. Narazu Samjina, you and the Singang money under USA. Jigwa Megerici. Joe Machigari, some good one. Oh, then they talk by yourself. Around Zutu, Tapa Chibu Rawachi, Sena, Yagari Turguade. The man and the Mandrigate, Tembo Megerici. You are not Tembuchi Tarbata Chichi. Legamambuchi, Kichi, Jurochi. During the mess and Zutu Shida Megicina, and the Meteoric Chauchi Metawares Turguada. But in the to the Mabuchi, over some around to Bachi, said and did it, said Zutu said that the order is some other. Rangune Tuba, Rangu Tuba, Rangsu Tuba, Sarah. And the Kiji in Jordan and Digma, Legacy to Mother, Tambura Chicoda, something Yora, or in teacher Kichi in Jordan, Sarah. So die in a what in the round what you go to say. In this summertime, Congo, Mawas, and over Rangune, Rangi, Manzu, the Tuba, round to Tuba, and she temper. The day is Shizuchi Yora. I am still a Nangba Yoda Chiba Yoda, Nangbe to the Malati Mambu Yoda. Tatanang was Uma Tenjo as Shishachi Shegora, Nangbe to the Moina and to the Ne, 200 ra. Or Tina Shichena or Tis the Yoma Rese. Shino Rawadu to what she said in Yomare. Jideng Tanyan Shipat and a Taba, some shower motto. Takares, Shitachita Yomar, Sachitani Razi Yomarese. Chuna Rangshinji Madua, Rawa the Madua. Rawa Yomarese, Tenjin Drill, Mabu's Tone, and a legacy she did teach in Tanya. Did some shower mother. The Shegora. Under the Shuna Machever was Jeba Chen, Chi Rava, Maris. Madame Macheba Macheva, she take it to then I thought was some shop, so what they call Shegora. Yeah, this is long.
So here, when we are talking about these various topics, there are ways of talking that are like sort of philosophical. There are people who thought a lot about sort of where did the world come from and how did this come about? How do things exist and so forth? I mean, we have our ordinary way of thinking, and these days our life is quite busy. It seems like maybe these philosophers in the past had a more relaxed lifestyle. They had the time to sort of sit around and think about these things rather than being so caught up in all kinds of activities. Now, so here, this is really, first, we're talking about those who sort of philosophize, use reasons in order to assert certain propositions. So they feel like in our innate mind, there is a sense that like our self is permanent. We had it before, we were there, and we will have it in the future. And there's something that's like this solid, stable kind of person. And that is the basis on which you can posit attaining liberation and so forth. forth. If there wasn't something stable and lasting and permanent, then how could one talk about liberation? It would all just sort of become indistinct and nothing would be functional. So for these kinds of schools, these lower tenant schools, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist, they would say that things need to have this kind of existence in their own right, inherent existence. And even some think like things can't be momentary if they're perishing moment to moment. How could there be any kind of functionality? Now, these types of philosophers, these essentialists, they say that there has to be something that we can identify that is that thing that exists in and of its own right, or exists by means of its own characteristics. Otherwise, there would basically be nothing. So lower philosophical schools, including what we call the sort of essentialists or realists, would say that you have to have something that really exists in and of itself or inherently in order to talk about things functioning and existing. Something that is merely dependently designated is not for them sufficient for existence. So, however, we're talking about from the perspective of the Prasangika Madhyamikas, and they would say that phenomena merely designated on worldly conventions does suffice for existence. There's not something that is sort of independent, existent in and of its own right, existent inherently. There's nothing beyond that. We don't need to have something that we can actually point to and say, this is that thing, but rather this kind of dependent designation suffices for existence.
Oh yeah. Oh, that this is some of the which oh, che condition ko Nambachena. Judan Kenchi Latene Tugura. Judan Kenchi Mena Kotasi. You make Emile Yoya Yomare. Koranda Timbe Kushi, Drepung in a Koranda Timbe. Yelenji Kushi, Tele Robaching, Lenji Kushi, Niku Yora. Judan Kenchi, Sosun and Drebu the Kiyoda, Judan Ken the Maton Drebu Kiyomare. In the Kutunga in a Tunga Juyo Gure. Jawa La, Jawa Dorche go to let Juyo, the 2 men Tawasi Ungomaro. The Tezukanga, Jukare, some church Tangiora. Ichigo around me, but Tunga, Jawan Damed, the lion to the Kadesi Ungore, Juchi Yore, the Juangi Jawasanga that the two Yore. In this age, Tande, Tome Maruba Servane, Ado Zimba Servo, Chagdan Serva, Nishan Sawachi Baseret. Juji unit is also social, Kansa social Yogura. Mato Shendachi, Yuchi Chen is also Ramame, to Bhutan, Karsore, Yawal, Nesonleke, Yawal Kasha, Yawal Shekashi to the Cheomara. In the Judo social duty, society do Judy social and Drachi Yokuara. In the social Karandos, and social Samlatanda Karando, Yunga Cheva Kariongudo, Sama Kariongudo, Memba Kariongudo. Ten and Drepung Tonchelia, Chendina la Kandakade, Wudo, the Samlatane. Or any Tarvatavia said, Tamjekimbekoa said, Semkikan Kanga say, you said, Roa. Semkikan to the Ganzo say, Jula Begin say, you said, Kanga. Kondunga yet to the Mavasona, Kumgini, Mavasoe, you said, the Mavasona, and it you again, less on the quiet young Maris, what the Samlo. On board standing, they long to share your. Oh, that this is an end, Tombanyeta. Shouldn't be needed in the Mashigdo. Yeah.
So here, this is a good way of thinking about it, that whatever thing it is, according to Buddhists, it is dependent upon causes and conditions. Things don't come about causelessly without any sort of cause, but rather one needs to have like a substantial cause that is harmonious with the result, that accords with the result, as well as the proper kind of coordinating conditions to bring about a particular result. It doesn't just come about causelessly. So when we look at our suffering, the kind of suffering that we experience in this uncontrolled taking rebirth and casting off bodies and so forth, this has to arise from a cause. It doesn't come about causelessly. So when we try to investigate and try to find, well, what is the cause of this? Well, looking for that, we can see that it is this grasping at a self, this ignorance which grasps at a self, and it is something that exists in each individual person. It is not as though someone else is causing you to be be reborn in a hell realm or sending you to a good realm and so forth, but rather it is due to the way of thinking that you have, that kind of type of thinking, as well as the conduct that follows after it, the sort of causes that we create that determine what suffering or happiness we will experience in the future. And so because of this, we can actually talk about liberation because things are causally dependent. Therefore, we have the ability to attain liberation if we get rid of the kinds of causes that lead to our suffering. If we extinguish those causes, things like anger and pride and that grasping at a self, then we're able to bring about that kind of state of liberation. So it is with this as a basis that we are entering into this discussion on emptiness, of understanding that this is that all things are causally come about causally, and therefore our suffering as well is the result of causes and conditions. And if we identify those causes, we can remove them.
Oh yeah, I did it. Shingdala Sokbe, Judan Drepung Chu Nam Sigdoa, Rangune Yebarma Nam Yese, Shingdala Soba Tala Soba Kanga, Ene, Takdo Sene, Rangune Trubashiraya Yorese, Lamke Nguma Nam Yese Wara. Number Chene, Dita Yebar Meva Lase, Conju Number Chebachene, Tala Soba Chutamje. Thabkhe tende tsene niju yore rangwene yore rangshingi yore rangi ngoyo so rangwene yore ese labhi yora meba laase. Ngobo nam rangwene trube ngonyi meba ma umaba nam jese ta umaba nam je rangwene trube tene nyese yoma rese umaba nam jese. Tete shingda tabu rangwene yonase umaba tazuke 다들 랑원에요 말에 다들 랑원에 매배 빼들려 싱더디 다된도 째는 니주요 말에서 그나 치료지 뭐고 싱더다부 스페셜로 나 싱더다부디 랑원에요나 게 다된게 제배 까발라스 로 싱더 랑게 야라래 랑원에 주베 셴도요 말에서 직선이요 말에서 싱더 랑엘라리 셴도 셴미마이 된대야메스 싱더디 Rangwe Tsudu Rangi Yaladan Dembe Tsukiwa Maris. Demba Teliani Chigirata. Mo Chiben Dembe Tsukita, Mo Taden Dembe Tsuki. Shinda Rangela Shin Sheme Mai Tendem. Yala La Mese. Yala Tuzu Shinda di Yala La. Mo Tade Pe Kaga Nishan Dembe Tsukiwa Mari. Ngarazu Chozikan Pova Shabanashi Demba Nashi. Kaga Chenwa. Yala Lia Shinda di Tsu. 타데션 때베스지와 말했어라. 야라라 메일다. 드버참에. 신대 야라 촉바참데 신대 말했어. 신대 입대 신대 말했어. 랑은에 주베 신대 지요나. 랑은에 주베 신대 거기래서는 니주어리 니주메도 와세. 어디나 신대 다대야. 공부다 타던도 세베는 니에요 말했어. 제거라. 어디 셰발라서 타던지 셰바신데 까고들라. Ngomawage umaba labke ortasu. Ngoma umaba namlas. Kweje tadendu sewe shinde rangune tuba gogba tanas. Kera tatun cheba chechene. Shinde rangune yo mare yo na dene nene chi raagure ti raya yo mare se. Kegi ora. Dene tiyena. Tana umabe shinde nyoba da tribala sowe jidebe tanye. Chunduna kyola miru anjuros. Shingda nyöse, shingda trishose, shingda nale miteshase, shingda na chala orshase, namsha rungi mare chera. Rangwine chi yogore, rangwine chi yoda ane te shingda se trishose kiyo, mite chala orche goro asigora. O te sonda kira uma tenjo sheba nashi chene, de tene nye chi mena ane shingda shatugu mare se, lega chinge shingda de rang mare se. Chi me bala.
So here then, picking up in the text, those who propound existence from the object side say that after you analyze phenomena that are causes or effects, like chariots and so forth, we use this example a lot, they will be found to exist. So, as opposed to that, Madhyamakas who say that phenomena have no essence say that you can refute the notion of a chariot, for instance, existing in its own right through performing a sevenfold analysis. So, we saw with the example, Madhyamakas again are asserting that nothing is existent in its own right from its own side. And the example that they give, whether we do this with a chariot or the person, is that if you search for it in these 7 ways, that you can't find it. So a chariot, for example, is not other than its parts. It doesn't exist just as its parts. It isn't the same thing as that, nor does it possess the parts. And when we talk about possession, we can talk about that in the sense of possessing something that is of a different nature, possessing something that is of the same nature. And then it also doesn't have a sort of relationship of support, wherein say like the chariot is the support for its parts. It is what the parts are dependent on, or like sort of like a cup sitting on top of a table, or the other way around, with the parts being the basis for then the chariot itself, which is the supported thing. So it doesn't exist in any of those 5 ways, nor is it sort of the mere collection of those parts upon which it is designated, nor is it the arrangement or the shape. But if it did exist in its own right or from its own side, then you would have to be able to point to it, or you would have to be able to find it in one of these 7 ways. We could say, oh yes, this is the chariot. So the Madhyamakas assert that there is no such chariot existing in its own right after you perform such an analysis. But the essentialists then say to the Madhyamakas, if you refute a chariot's existence in its own right by searching in these 7 ways, then conventional phenomena of the world, such as an opponent of the middle way buying a chariot or delivering a chariot, become impossible for you. So for these essentialists, they think that, well, if you deny the existence of something in its own right, if you say it's not findable through such analysis, then conventions like, oh, bring that chariot, or you need to buy a chariot, or carry that over here in that chariot, become non-functional. They're not able to be used. It sort of undermines. So for them, it only for things that exist in their own right could you posit them as functional phenomena in the world.
Oh yeah. The two love song. Uma be pa love ge oda. Uma be se ngwe ma la landus the land ja ge oda. Kyan de ne ngwe ma wa che khona la jur ge so sing da sha me to be kyan de kheran le ong ge se ra. Sing da ngwe bu kare na ti de sing da re se pa te ne tak ba cham la ma sha che. Sing da ka ge re se che te ne ra ye che ne te ra ye yo ma re se go ra. Ra ye me ne ta kheran sing da me ge re do de se. Yana rangune ye gore ne rangune ye ba chen rag mare che kiran le sing de chibala soba sing de nal te ne chala ola sobe chawa de kiran rong mare sgora che kona la jorje ko chala mi ju go se uma bala te ne tak ba samria sing de kholo la soba te la soba te zul te ne sing de res la gore te sam ji sing de yimba sore ji de tanyel ta ga cha sha gur ma do ta sing de ka gre se te ne me de sembatanda ay segra otide ko jala menju ko se idar shena kye jene ngo kan jogwa number 7 de telwe nye bala ngo na tubar jogwa chi jese kira jene ngo kan de shana rangune yese rangzu tuba chi yese rangwa chi yese ngo te chene nye bal shagu doas ele shen ngo tene takpa sam shagu de kira shig me doas wa shagu me doas Yenda rangune trubate yo mare, yenda shingdo la sobe tanye, jitenge tanye tu kiran la mevare dure se gora. Tele shen ngobo nam trube chu shingda tabu rangi chashe la soba. Kawana wa nam te o tele shen, umaba nam shi chigi yenda rangune mena ya, chashe chile tene di shingda re, di namdu re, di kangba re, spa tene takba samle shagi yore. Tene takba samle shaya de kirang sha thugu me doase. Tene takba sam mayimba rangune chi tsene shagu de rangune yone tsene ragurwa. Tinalo ne chi ragurwa, tinalo ne raya me doase. Kisunda kirang sha thugu marese. Kolo la soba kaan na wanam takshir songne se. De shingda wo shi mata mache bar, jitengi tanya dogbe tsu, de samye shingda trube tsu de Mama Kyoji, Kemalambasa, Keran Jidengi Tanyelia, Jalakarina Chitone, Telemingri Tani, Tetsamgi, Dripbache, Simbache, then the top of some Shaviora. He shall not the Keran Keling Maduasivora. Oh, Nazu Tikeling, Matenjo, and Tikeling, Jidengi Tanya, then the top of some Shabbat, Tetsam over to you just over the Sevora. Shinda Nevala Sobe, Tanya, Kyola Mirosha, the Kera, and Shinda Nevase, Shinda Kagre, that's any Chiragoro. And it said, and any Ragmaris, Shinda Yogan the Cadre. So would the Yogore, Sem the Yogore, Kazakagres, and it said, and the Ragmando. Koja Uma Namlane, Shinda Rangun and Meja, Shinde Tanya Getanam, Metebe, Meju Dese, Uma Bala Rangun, Truba Yomare, sending ye Yomare. Then ye manata Mendoas Mare, Mebeton da Mare, Rangun and Mebeton Dare. Shinda Yo might take it down with Jitan Tanya Tadune, Namdula Sobasun and then Namdus chair, Carming Taginetti Tadu, but in a Tutsare, Madame Mazebangane. Tinalo Nechi Namdure, Tichala Chik Direse, Chili Zugu Marwa. Then a Tabasan Pasha Gora, or teaching the use of Tagareso. Tatula Sobe. Number Chebana, Kunzuta Tondam Kanto and Shinda Duban Minjurgese. Tatu says Shinde Chebatella Tatu Tagila Chamber. Or Tende said and Shinda Raumarese. Number Cheba Meber Khan Shave Colola Sobe, Yala Tashir Chenes. Tende Cheba Machebe, Colota, Chikinalo, Tesata, and you Tindel Tene or the Shinda Rese, then a Tapa Samlia, Shagu Resora. Cololo Sabot, Tashir Chenes. You told the Tagbe Shichan or Pig Shinda Red was. Or Pig Motor Red was, Pig Namdu Red was. Pig Kamba Red was, but in a Tapa shower, tell somebody. Kamba Yimbata Bashago Resora. Juniper Tashichan and dishing that she tried to talk about some discharging Nebe. Shinda Tuber John Nebe's horse, Umaba Wote, Sawachi Tomgenge. Dishing the Resmingta. And then she call it part, to the Kokalikali or the Tashin the Yungutu Sarah. Call it a Twatch, Tashing the Shasha as a Shagra. Kochachi Tamjet and Jidan Tanyan and Shinja Dogores. Yeah, teach love.
Mm, mm. So, here then I'm just having trouble finding one of these sentences in English or in the Tibetan. But so, in other words, essentialists accuse Madhyamakas of nihilism because essentialists believe that to refute intrinsic existence is to refute existence altogether. And now I don't see that in the Tibetan, but I mean it's fine. And so, in response to again, the essentialists are accusing the Madhyamakas of saying that if you refute this chariot's or whatever object's existence in its own right, then you can't use conventional terms. You can't even talk about things because they would just not exist at all. And so in response to the essentialists, the Madhyamakas say, this fault is true of you, essentialists, not of us. How is this so? When you, essentialists, analyze any phenomena that you posit, you search for it, find it, and posit things as established. You do not accept establishing a chariot merely by merely taking as its basis of imputation whatever parts appear, such as a chariot's wheels and so forth, and then saying, this is a chariot, imputing a worldly convention without pursuing any analysis or investigation. So here for us, Madhyamak, so therefore the conventions of buying a chariot and so forth are impossible for you, because for you, those essentialists, they would say that to even talk about something like this is a chariot or buy that chariot, this is the chariot is carrying that, one would need to find something, be able to within sort of the course of analysis, be able to point to something that is that thing. However, that is not how the world conventions work. So therefore the conventions of buying a chariot and so forth are impossible for those essentialists. But for us Madhyamakas, although the chariot does not exist in its own right, conventional objects such as chariots do not incur the fault of unfeasibility. So when you analyze using the sevenfold analysis and so forth, a chariot is not established either conventionally or ultimately. But when you don't analyze or investigate and take as your basis of imputation whatever part appears, so there's a collection of parts that appear, and then we say, oh, this is a chariot, and so forth. We merely designate with terms and concepts. And when we do, like, this is a chariot, you can posit the existence of a functioning chariot. So for the essentialists, there would be all kinds of faults that would be incurred. If you say, tried to use the term like, that person bought a chariot. Well, where is that person? If the person needs to be found within the kind of analysis, are they their mind, are they their body, and so forth, you can actually then speak of a person buying a chariot because you can't find them upon analysis. And so for those essentialists, these terms actually fall apart. But for the Madhyamakas, to not be able to find something through that kind of analysis is not to establish its non-existence, but to establish its non-inherent existence. And so for them to have a various collection of parts, and then you designate, oh, that's a chariot, that's a car, that's a plane, that's a house, and so forth, that suffices for its existence. Like, you're at a factory, all these parts come together, and then someone says, ah, yes, this is a plane. Well, that is the extent of its existence. If you try to search for something beyond that, you won't be able to find it. But when we don't investigate and analyze, we can use conventionalities perfectly well.
Oh yeah. Darian Juba Randeles, Tala Shesarte, Kunjangiora,
Mm.
Umaten Yuagi, and it the saw the patent daughter of Rachenderkirti. Oh, the Umajuba, Randenal, the Sonshas, the Kunjangiora, Umaten Yue, Kevachimbu Kongat, the Sonshas. Yeba didn't kill Konala Judes, Shinda, Shametuba, Shinda Trishu, Shinda, and Mindubis, Namsha Shametubati. Kerangoma Kerana Yanti Jugres or Tadangar Shebe to number 20 Chavanase. Raya Yuna number 20 Kone, and it's said a need you over Shinda Titinia Yomares or Sena Shinda Mitations, Shinda Ragumari, the Shinda Restic Shire Tegmari. Kirja number 10 and Wobuna Tuba Jobase. Goma Keraju number 10. Zenet and Dirisha Sichi ran anything there, Resha go to Asigora. It's a chin pin and the Shinda Yambachi Raguma Resigora, Rangune to be Sora. A Kirjan number 10 and Wobuna, Truba number Jobachella. Trube Tabshanke Malambet, each Shinda Kershaw, Checha Ola Sobe, Judembe Tanya Kyola, Chidar Drubar Jurte. Ochalane Yamama, Kerage, Tabshan Kelingamaduase, Sene Maranaya, Umabayena, then a Tawasamla, Chawachin, the Shing the Shagu Rese, the Tapti order. Ramune to the Senera Omare. Then the Debarjo, the Tenet Tawasamlia, Chawacheva, a colote Yokudonishin the Yogis, Shinda Dosha, Shinda Tola Chisha Sera, Chawakanga Rungi or Eswara. The Kerang de Kelingamaduase. Rangune Yona Yoramato Rangune Menaya, then a tap was some Chachi Ruan Shatu Madonganzo Umabaina, the Shatu Grace and Namsha. Oh, Tanya Chola, Druber Mejuros, Kochalane Yabate Medes, Umatenju Alan Yabate Yomares, Kangachinas, Talajor. Then a Dineto and Gidendos, Shingdati, Sigora, Ayana Tatin Yisora. Tatu the Pumbutan, Tatu the Chevachin Ragamares. Then I sing that in Jiden, Shinda Chiru, Shindati, Tatu the Chevachin Ragamadoas, the Pelchan Shegora. Then a Tinito Ams. Jidendo number to Yurubjur Meme, Geshe. Tatu Yukon Chevachina. Roa. The Konani to turn number to Besu Ragamare. Jidengi Tanya on to Chena, then Rayachi Homares Gora. Then a Tinito Am, the Konani Sigora, Dambas. Jideng Tanya dose, Tanya to Seora. Number 20 and Dubjur members, take it and number 20 Kone, Diresha, Chiraya, Shioma, Resora. And the Karina, Namje Meber, Jigden, and the Ranga Yalatendo. Umatenju get in the Cheba Choma, dishing the race at 10 and talk what some Shagore. Madote, number cheba chen ta tanda kagrese dires labchane tanda kagrese chen rai shomara namje mebar jiden yele de rang yala tenen do bayes rang shinde yala chashe to sule tene de shinde rese wa namdu yala kolo sama bochilo pagbada kolo la sobate sule tene de namdu resha pa tagre de tagwa chamla chawa chenge shagre namdu ya cha dos no ya pirso se babso se namdu chala rochil kesho so namdu kesho sha se ora kesho sa kolo de namdu gere da yo maro number then you do your meme namje me banji de nyele de rang yala tene dog ba yes we tipo to chilang.
Mhm. So the reasoning has been laid out above, and now we turn to the kind of source for that, the great Prasangika master Chandrakirti. So in this vein, Chandrakirti states in his explanation of entering the middle way, so his self-commentary there, auto-commentary, so he says then, this fault is only true of you essentialists, like as was explained above, that conventions wouldn't work. We can't speak about a chariot, someone buying a chariot, going in a chariot, and so forth. A lack of feasibility isn't our problem. Rather, it's your problem. So it is like this. When one searches in the 7 ways, as previously explained, a chariot is not feasible. You can't find something and point to it and say, this is a chariot. But rather you posit a phenomena as existent after analysis and do not assert any other way of establishment. So for these essentialists, for them, you have to be able to find something to posit existence. Otherwise, things can't be established at all. Whereas for Prasangikas, it's kind of the opposite, that it's merely through dependent designation that phenomena are established, that the worldly conventions are established. So therefore, for an essentialist like this, how can you posit, or how can you establish worldly conventions, such as bring the chariot? This fault is not ours. So how so? And again, there's this verse then. This chariot is not established in the 7 ways, either in reality or for the world. Yet without analysis, just for the world, it is imputed independence on its parts. So here, for the Prasangika Madhyamakas, they would say that actually, if you don't find on investigation, we can see that when we use the reasoning, investigating suchness, investigating that ultimate nature, to not find something actually leaves the space for things to exist as merely dependent originations, merely dependently designated. So, for example, when one uses the kind of 7-fold analysis to try to find a thing, the thing that is designated, we can't find it. We can't point to something and say, this is the chariot. And again, this is using the kind of reasoning, investigating the ultimate, searching for suchness. That's the only thing that can be found. But this thing that is merely designated as a chariot, that is not able to be found, that is established by worldly convention. So we can talk about a chariot, buying a chariot carrying someone, and so forth. And so like with a plane, for example, a plane is designated on a collection of parts that like the outer parts and the engine and the wheels and so forth. And when a fault comes to one of those parts, we say, oh, the plane broke down. But the plane isn't that part that broke, but yet in worldly conventions, we can speak feasibly in that kind of a way. And so it's a problem for the essentialists, but not for the Madhyamakas, because phenomena are, without analysis, imputed just independence, dependently designated with names and concepts.
Oh yeah. Yetan tsisele se han dawa draba ke umatsawa shirab jen draba tsisele wa. Tsisele pasen patak se tro. Jidembe jidemba so sura. Shingatam ge shimbala soba tezuge. Dre matam ne dre shiya ngombuche ya ke ngutona. Te da shinga ke sha sir ma do te tale kuitu su yone ke bare mene ke bare ra tale ke bare rawa tu be shele ke bare tale me shan nikale ke bare tu mene ke ra kande re tende cheba ke chimare chigal ya tabche tando ngombu ya jo ta tando ya ke unge se ta ga cha sha ro dinashin tanya chagule segora. Sisele se. Jitembe tada shenle she chawa tetabula sobe number cheban juba meber chene. Tende cheba chigma reser. Namchu chigma reser. Julen Drepung jongo she chawa detabu stoba yendo. Ota tamda yabu kigdo se labgiri manda. Ta kandesi kigdo se. Gyutusu yoni kigdo, meni kigdo. Roa. Dale kesde gyutusu yoni kigre segora chirubayna. Kutsegi ora tsede. Gyutusu yoni kotine ya tayo go rese kora. Gyutusu meni kaya yoma rese gora. Pena jima tsirna numtoya mendo wase gora. Gyu chimalya numtoya mendo wase. Telisi yungari chunjung de yora. Tirsuna numtongu do wase gora. Gyutusu yoni kotine so tayo gora mada. Gyutusu mengenshi tine ya tayo yoma rese gora. Tagesu tire. Gyu tangni kabne kora yoni ni ya tayo go rese gora. Tanti tagesu. Shengesu ya gyu Negos mene rangwadu tube kyu shenchi le tene Drepung shenchi kigre shenji se. Kashe taatan shenjiga le kigre se. Kashe ju mene kigre se. Kyangbi bari na ju kwa mara Koran rangshin tanga re. Tele kyu she, tele kyu, tende namsha yo mara tende keli gara. Tanga de uma bayne tende kanya keli mara se. Tanga shenda niga kyumili kiwa kigi mara. Tenjen Drepung jonga se. Judange sokbala tene kebare esegara. Sisele judembe tada shenle chechawa tetabola sobe number choba jugwa mebar chene cheba machene segara. Julen Drepung jongo chechawa desam she toba yenos. Lobe ya tetar number shakbanja. Lobe ya judenge tanya de timba. Tanya de yusu den judenge tanya ne shecha shagare se shesum bataro. Ya otish.
No. So then for a second quotation, also in Chandrakirti's clear words, and here this is a commentary that he made on Nagarjuna's root verses on wisdom. And so here, like for example, when worldly persons do not enter into analysis wherein they say such things as from both self and other, and so forth, but realize merely this effect comes from this cause. So like when farmers say are going to plant their fields, they create the proper sort of causes. They plant their seeds and they know that sprouts will come about from those causes and conditions coming together. But they don't sort of enter into analysis and say like, oh, well, where does that sprout come from? Did the sprout exist at the time of its cause, or does it come from something that is sort of autonomously established as another? Or does it come from both self and other? Or is this arising causelessly? But rather they realize merely this effect comes from this cause without analysis or investigation. Now, again, philosophers sort of enter into this kind of analysis and land on different positions. Like there are those that say, well, the effect has to exist at the time of the cause. Like, for example, if you try to press a grain of sand, you're not going to get oil because that oil doesn't exist. But you have a mustard seed, you can press that and you're going to get oil out of it. And so see here, the effect existed at the time of the cause. It had to be there or else it couldn't come about. And then there are those that would say that no, it's actually the case that things arise from causes that are separate from them, that are inherently different or established as something different than them. There are those that assert that it is both self and other that lead to the production of effects. And there are those that say, no, things come about causelessly. Like there's, those hedonists or sort of chakravartins who say that there is no sort of causal chain that can be accepted, but rather things just come about causelessly. Rather, when we don't investigate or analyze, there's mere dependent origination. There's merely this effect comes from this cause. So the master Nagarjuna also presented it this way. This is also the assertion of that great master.
Oh yeah. But the question is loving you some joy. Tawashira comes to Tambu Tashi Tangachi, but this Tawashira comes to Angomulutuk. And today, Umajuba comes to Tangi Lebejan, Tatin said it. Oh, Umatawashira comes to Gomulutuk, Karsudosana. Sangeli Chana Sungudwa. Sanje chumde de tabute songora, sanje kadeshina, sanje sange kansate la songora. Ane sanje tabute rangwine yo marese, sanje ta semje kare na teko nelu tatu tele kyabake yo mare, sanje achiburu rangwine yo resera, semje tinde rangwine mena se tinde kyabache yo mare, nelu kanga chibari chi yo ra. Tinde ko kumin se sanje chumde de rangwine yo marese, rangwine yo na, ne sanje ke pumbuti rangwine trube sanje rebes di maro ase gora. Pumbu nga yo ra, pumi se, pumbu le she me se, sanje de pumbu nga budi pashan di mayinge je pe lo su yanchi yo rebes, tade tu yo rebes gora, pumi pumbu le she me se. Pumbu nga di pashan shenda ju sanje she mo shing marwa. Yene pumbu nga ke chawa cheba te sanje ke chawa cheba le do marwa. Sanje se de pe pumbu nga le ngo tade pe kabu ngombo sebu na shi loga chi yo na. Ane pumbu chawa cheba sanje ke shene che songpa ta rwa. Yene sanje ke songpa chan do marwa. Sanje ke shene songpa rwa. Shene de sanje de pe loga. Songpa le lo se pe kaka chi yo na sigora. Pumbu le she mi se. Pumbu le tuen shendo yang, ngo tade chane pe ngombo sebu na shi chane rawan tu tuba che yo ma re se. Pumbu le she. Tela pumbu se, sanje de rawan tu tuba sha, tela pumbu de rawan tu tuba se, tuen shen ki ten de me su ki yo ma re se. Tuen shen to sin de chok si de pe kaka rwa. Teli hane, de potur sha do do, chu sha do, de pe kaka rwa, tende chane yo ma re se gora. Pumbu le she. Tela pumbu se, sanje de chok si de shi che, tela pumbu de pa ten pe kaka chen te, tende ma re se. Yang pumbu de shi de she, sanje de tila tenge na shi che, pe kaka chen tende nyi che yo, te ma re se. Pumbu le she me. Sanje de pumbu le tuen shen be su ki tenge ma re, pumbu de sanje le tuen shen be su ki tenge ma re se. Pe ngo tade chen si gora, ngombo sebu na shi ta pala na shi kaka chen. Pumbu le she. Tishin shiba pumbu de me se. Tishin shiba la pumbu dan den se ya na. Den se. Denpa tila denpa tsuki yo ma re se. Denpa tsuki yo na ya nyi hirwa. Ngo chiba chini denpa tsuki yo rbe. Tangi lu la kodan den se ane shi. Kora ngo chashe rbe che che. Ya na rwa le ching liya tatan den, mota tan den se ane shi. Pe kaka chini denpa re. Den den tsu yo ma re se ora. Kechido tanga doa. Rangwene truba yo na ta tende tsu liyo kora. Rangwene truba. Chitu yore, rangwene trube, tade tu yore, rangwene trube, denpa ta antinde ta nga shikidwa. Ta teka liya ane nyi ndawa traba ke. Pumbu yip te ta ma res, sanje ma res. Pumbu nga tsokpa tsamde sanje ma res, nyi chane ta tun shikidwa. Ti ta la pa chaya teka liya, di uma juba kasu ndawa traba ke ta nyi nebe, ta nyi nene. ane tā tuyō sikidwa. Shinda rāyāla le shende me, sheme ma ye tende yame, yāla la me, yāla tāde me, dība tsame ye me chi shino os. O te kānga rāngwene trūpa chi yo na, kādi re se. Rāngwene trūpa chik tu yo ar tā, rāngwene trūpa tade tu yo ar re se. Tende cheba chikidwa. Tanda tāda buti rāngwene trūpa yo ma re se, yo na pumbu tā rāngwe tsuki chik tu yo ar tā, rāngwe tsuki tade tu yo ar re se. Tipa chik da tade ngi di kebar shinani taa nga da taa tiyo di re do. Ya di chi labna ngi re.
So here, when it comes to the various types of arguments that are presented, we can talk about sort of various extremes of when we speak about the thing and its basis of designation, like say taking the person, we can talk about it. Well, is it something that is exactly the same as the person, or is it something completely different? That would be like a twofold kind of analysis, these two sorts of extremes. And we saw that at the beginning of Nagarjuna's root verses on wisdom, there was the analysis of the fourfold production from self, from other, both self and other, or from neither. And then we see as well the presentation of this kind of five-pointed analysis that, again, if something is existent from its own side, has this kind of inherent existence, it should be findable through this type of analysis. Now here in Root Verses on Wisdom, Nagarjuna uses the example of the Tathagata or a Buddha, but it's not as though like when we do this analysis and we find that Buddhas are not existent from their own side, but regular beings would be, or somehow that we investigate ourselves and we see like, oh, ordinary beings don't exist from their own side, but the Buddha, that special important being, is existent from its own side. There's no difference. Neither of these has that kind of existence in its own right from its own side. So here, in the verse that is in the Root Verses of Wisdom by Nagarjuna, he says that the Tathagata is not the aggregates, nor is it other than the aggregates. It's not sort of supported by the aggregates, nor is it the support of the aggregates, nor is it somehow in possession of the aggregates. But apart from these, what could the Tathagata be? So here we are analyzing in a way in which if something were inherently existent, if it had that kind of existence in and of itself, in its own right, then it would have to be found, or it would have to exist in one of these ways. And so it can't be that the Tathagata or the Buddha is just the aggregates, but nor could it be something that is like totally separate apart from those aggregates, because then how could we talk about the Buddha's activities or the Buddha's speech? They wouldn't be connected in any way. But nor are these established in a way where they are of a different nature, but sort of like the support and the supported. So it's not as though the aggregates are the support and then the Buddha is something that exists, or the Tathagata on top of those, like inherently in and of its own right. No, like the way that we would put something like a bowl on a table, nor is it the case that the Buddha is the basis and the aggregates are kind of like dependent on that. Nor is there a relationship of possession. And again, we can talk about possession of two types, something that is of a single sort of nature, like the way that the Buddha possesses a head, that is of one kind of nature. Or we could talk about like Devadatta having a car or having a horse, something that is of a totally different nature. And so when we investigate in this way, investigate these sort of five extremes, we don't find the existence of that thing, the inherent existence of that Tathagata in this case. Now, in Chandrakirti's entry to the middle way, he adds on two different types of analysis, or kind of extremes, to create the sevenfold analysis. So in addition to the five presented by Nagarjuna, he adds that it is also the case that the chariot, and again, when we are analyzing a chariot, we can said that again, it's not asserted to be other than its parts, not to be non-other. It doesn't possess them. It doesn't depend on the parts. The parts do not depend upon it. And then here, Chandrakirti adds, nor neither is the mere collection of the parts, nor is it their shape. So in addition to those five, it isn't something that can be, if it were established from its own side, it should be found in one of these ways. It should be have those relationships, or it should be the arrangement of those shapes, the mere collection of those, but it isn't found when analyzed, and therefore does not exist in and of its own right.
Oh yeah. Ande ro dirda. Chönam rangwene trubang gojan chönam mengo ba sedira. Oh. Tadi kande siwarsana. Namba sanje bena sirap nyembuna le yudo sume tame teme rome serbi yongwara. Ane tsamjanglia kansa jebabone mimi so sera. Jebabu kansa de yo mare songere tide yongudwa. Jebabone mimi so segera. Oh yeah. Oh tende ta tende jeba chene sanje yo mare. Ane shingda tozo ta tende jeba chene yo mare se. Jeba chene kagudwa. Oh tozo kaya te kar kagurasana. 저네 랑은에 여바도 까요라 마도 초코나 까요 말에서 와라 랑은에 여반 거자 쳐나면 거 봐. 어디 여바쳐오라 빼나 야갈이야 낙바들 가르치고 그랬으나 Niradamawa Sigre. Mebar Mawa Sigra. Kunzu Samne, Sanje Chumden de Pene, Taba Chibu Rama Yingi, Tati Yomarison, Chiruati Kedegra, Taxi Rama Changitas, Nanga Chebe Kibus Nangla Tangichias, Chitas, Chi Sobotida, Jundu the Mavishod, Tadi Kaduina, Juachi and Roya Yomarisura. Simja Shisana, Sobol Sajan, Sobodi Judor, Tadi Jigamaris, the Mavasura Saja. The Mavasund, the other time Mavas, Sanja Chumden, the time Mava Labutose, Nugore. Taxi Rama Changi Sungura, Madu Dame Sungura. I man any quality Kora Simje, Tunganyangri, Tarwa Togore, Nandulami Koba Togore, Sanje Koba Togore Suguda, Amena. Then the Debra Jueta Iore, then a talk was some Iore, Midakba, Juachinge, then a talk was some Iorba. Taxi Rawaj and Gitayo Marmat, what is the young Castor, Nambalia, Tamebarma, there, Nasticola Sigria. I may see the Chibabu may see. And it doesn't Hindu Shadation and Timbadi repeat. It's a Meban Mawa, Cheta said, Mevama. Sigora. I think that go ahead, Karaka goes the Ramunatuba. Taki Sanje Chumden de Tagna Tatu Hinchin and Chabachin Kaswa. The Sanje Shiba de Rawan to Trubachioma, race. Rawan to Trubachiona. And Pumbuti Revendi Rawan to Trube, Sobudi Rawan to Trube Tarebe, Iroa. And the Pumbule Shendo Rawan to Trube Tayorbe, Pumbudan Chicken and Rawan to Trube Tayorbe, the Kawyora. Pumbudan Chicken and Nani Nyawa Lange Pumbudan Yawa Lembabuni Chichadora. Pumbuda Beta de and Ani Dremet de Shadora. Pumbunga Chawacheba the Tavachawacha Maimba Chadora. What you do, Karsura? Onda so me dame so ete so kuran ka yomara pumbu yese ta yeba sharo a mena pumbu lemba langje pumbu nga de yong marwa so ji pumbu choya pumbu de shado oche de goye de rangun druba ka yor ma do chida mes chene ka yomare sti shegora dole so mese Shiram Nimbika Suguda Su Me Trames. Godela Chutamja Ranshinji Tongba Namba Yanda Bachesu Tao Siora, and the Su Me Trames Sugudo. Otina Shin Doy Capsua, the Anchidange Tanya Jiwangi in Gitandambane Maino Soera, and the Su Me Trame Kagam Namba Tamsa Chimbishipado Memes Mambuora. Jidangi Tanya Diore, Tandamba Yomar, Tene, Rawan Chini Yomare Sungora. Oh, dear. Dole su meche soda. Cheba bone mimi sauce ya. Le da number me bayore, le da nami, le sage da nami nyobe. Ta taji rawanji ta rawan trube ta ti yo mare sungora. Cheba bone mimi sauce. She su so kakbata. Le cheba bu kansa namne. Da ranshingi yobata. Rangune yobata. Tendamba yoba. Tezuka yora. Rangjatubas. Pumbula Madene, Koranjanga Netube, she or Maris or Rangjatubas, Yelisora. Rangjatube, Sayegi, Ranshika by Ingis. Then I talk about some G. Itigi Leche Babuda. Then I talk about some Yakawada Tibe Leche Babu Yore. Debutawada Tungan Yuabu Kansa Yore, Sora. You do Yuabu Chawachini Chebabu. Oh, Chebabo, don't go like you, but only you have a shower with the Mava Mare Sora. Don't number Mava the Madu Mare. Take up my ember soon sauce. What about it?
Mm. So, then next we turn to the section on refuting phenomena existing in their own right does not refute phenomena. So here we see for example, the Heart Sutra, lots of things where it says there is no form, no feelings, no, and so forth, no, this. And like, for example, the Sutra of the Ultimate Emptiness says, do not observe an agent. And so some might take this to a nihilistic kind of extreme, saying that there is no Buddha, there's no chariot, and so forth. But we should understand that refuting phenomena existing in their own right, the thing that is being refuted is that kind of existence in its own right. It's refuting inherent existence, not the mere existence of that thing. So there were those sort of like mantrikas, maybe Hindu practitioners at the time of the Buddha, and they really gave him this name of being sort of like someone who propounded selflessness in the sense of they look at his teachings as being quite nihilistic. Like if there is no self, if there is nothing that to back up for those kind of Hindu practitioners, they would say that there is this kind of like permanent, solitary, autonomous self. Whether you're alive or dead, like you're going through various rebirths, but there's something that's remaining stable through that. There's this self, this Atman. And so by calling the Buddha the proponent of anatman, of selflessness, they didn't like qualify that properly by saying, well, he doesn't assert an inherently existent self, but rather they sort of saw it as nihilism. Like, well, he's going around saying there's no self whatsoever. But it isn't the case that the Buddha said there's no self whatsoever, but rather that there is a self, but it is merely dependently originated, dependently designated as a self. And so for them, that's kind of totally unacceptable to not propound such a permanent, kind of lasting, stable self. It falls into this sort of nihilistic extreme. Thereby, they gave that name to the Buddha. But so here, when it says in the Heart Sutra, there is no form and so on, and the Sutra of Ultimate Emptiness says, do not observe an agent, Madhyamakas say that such refutations of the aggregates and of a person who is an agent of karmic actions are not refuting their conventional existence, but their intrinsic existence. They're existing in their own right, their ultimate existence, and their nature that is substantially existent in the sense of being self-sufficient. So there does not exist an agent of non-virtuous and virtuous karmic actions. There does exist an agent of non-virtuous and virtuous karmic actions that is a mere dependent imputation and an agent that is able to function in the sense of experiencing the effects of happiness and suffering. This agent is not refuted, but it is that kind of inherently existent agent. So again, if there were an inherently existent person, then we would have to ask, is it inherently the same as the aggregates, or is it something that is different? If we tried to say that, well, it is the aggregates, we would fall into this problem that, like, say, when you take rebirth in a hell realm, the person who takes rebirth, the appropriator, and those aggregates that are appropriated, they would collapse into one. They would be the same thing. Or if they're totally sort of unconnected others, then how can there be any sort of connection between them? Like saying, like, I'm going or something, because those aggregates and the self are totally unconnected. But it isn't the case that when you are saying that when you search for the aggregates and they can't be found with analysis, or you search for the person and they can't be found, it isn't that the entire presentation of liberation or any sort of functionality collapses, but rather these exist as dependent imputations. When you search for it and it's not findable through that kind of ultimate analysis, this does not establish its utter non-existence, but rather that it doesn't exist in the sense of being self-sufficient or ultimately existing in its own right. The agent as a mere dependent origination or a mere dependent imputation is not refuted.
Oh yeah. Tanda tangmal shaya de kong changi ora. Tadayan jukba randeles. Lobe dawa chaba uma jukban che. Ti jeba korang je orwa. Jukba rande korang ge uma jukba jeba jeba ti nangles ora. Tangba tongba nyi dole ti na long chang ora. Doi long chang. Yang kang le cheba boni mami kese. Le sange ke kansa rawa ti yo mares. Ina le sakpa yo re la. Ti jebu number member. Dewa da tunga nyonga te yo re se do. Oh. Yene shi cheba tele ne cheba bo rang shin do juba ka ba shibo. Ti kar sungurasna. Le sakpa bode le sokpa bode. Rang shin de tube le sokpa bode ka yo re ma do. Le songe ke kansa me sungu yo mares. Tene takbar chawa tanya ki yala to kyuba ya, tanya to yala to kyurba ya, 까고 세티 때네 딱바 저 당연히도 여버티 까고 시저네 셰버 메자세 이 삼주요 말에서 와라 랑신 주바 까르마도 당연히도 여버 때네 딱바 삼지 다데 까고 말에세 시럽 님부급서 저 탐제 랑신메바 송고르도 소메 담메 송고도 이나 초탐 고들이야 초탐제 랑신게 동바 남바양다고 제서 따오소 이 제례안이 소메 담메 드메세 레레리아 랑신게 동바메 소메 담메 마샤로 붐레자서 붐 실진게 동 붐레자서라 그냥 지den게 탄예제 왕게 이제 전담번에 마이노 송게쇼라 전담번에 마이노 시송바타르서 어때 지den게 탄예제 왕게 전담번 여바 마이 시베도 다르마도 메시베도 다마레 소다 어디치로시나
So then to support that kind of assertion, Chandrakirti quotes the Sutra of the Ultimate Emptiness in his explanation of entering the middle way, which is again his auto commentary. And so here, where it says, do not observe an agent from that. Karma exists and maturation as well. And so we should understand this, you should understand from this statement the refutation of an intrinsically existent agent, but you should not think this also refutes its conventional component, its dependent imputation. So here, although this says do not observe an agent in the sense that there's not a kind of inherently existent agent or person who accumulates karma, it is not refuting the mere accumulation of karma or the mere agent. And so this is echoed as well in the Heart Sutra, which states, correctly view even those 5 aggregates as empty of intrinsic existence. And then we see there is no form, no sound, and so forth, all of these lists of no. But we need to understand that it is that empty of intrinsic existence that is being applied to all of those. And in the Perfection of Wisdom in 100,000 verses, it says as well, it is by the power of worldly convention, but not ultimately. So when an agent is denied, there is no ultimately existent agent who accumulates karma or ultimately existent, but rather these exist by the power of worldly convention.
Oh yeah, this way.
Eso.
Oh yeah, that then the talk about some like chachi from our sector. The shit on chashi chile ten and day, Kaware, Kambare, Pumbare, Sepat, and the talk about some and the Chawachi Tumgang around and the Chawachi Tumgang. Over the shadow with the Esigo, then I talk about some Sashi Romas. And we're mountain, and then I talk about some Chawach again when the shadow mothers. Love how some mother, Korango, Mankacha do this. Chawach and get the shadow mothers, some girl out in the mothers. The she chashel and upon the race for about some chashet to the legacy. Jebabo, any no Koran Chawach about the shadow with the Esigo. Then I talk about some Chachi Romas. Kondo shebata tenjuwe ludire, ubetabuse, rangi takshi, kadang shabdang toa la soba tezuda sura, rawandu tube chikto yo mare, rawandu tube tadeto yo mares, rawandu tube chune tangaye kone cheba chene ragu rese, ubeti rangi yala da chikto me, tadet me, pumi pumbule se me, tela pumi terde me, tishishiba punde me se, tila shi kangal chachora, ubu shandal pumbule chachora. Nambange chena yoba mayi yase. The cheba chena ragabade. Takshita toa sola tene, dipumbarese, or tene taba samlia, and tina chuluyata, transiluyata, chuchuyala soba, lega kanga chetu gurese. There's some chava chetu going over the shato gurese ora. Tene taba some chuzimbala soba, chava chineki pumba joba nevandine. Mawa Namjin John Mishi, John, thank you and John Nicholas. Then I talk about some Chachi Roade, over Tinduma was over Joshingi Marese. Then John Matuzako, the Batuba Raminachi years ago. Thank you again, Jotu. Then Oma thank you at Timu Maimbe, Kaju Mozarche, Chendo Sumba the last horse. The Oma thank you at Kaju Mozarche, then I talk about some Chachi Roan Jobat. Chinda ten at top rangi colossal at ten at top of some ray. Inayako Drupake and Mindro Salas over Chawache to be orders. There's some Chawashato with this. 디 콩디 장교라 야 디버 냠도 럽션디도 대다리안 다와 잡베세 시게벤데바 저도 샤다세 시게벤데바 시오라 다와 잡베세 디나래 송거라 공부를 써봐 남랑게 줄래 다시래 띵이다 셴도 남방아 쳔나 공부를 써봐 까와를 써봐 강사 신다 남줄라 써봐 정말 당anga 건데 쳔바셔서도 라원 자세다 라원도 주베 찍도요 말에 라원도 주베 타대도요 말에세 근데 이제 봐 쳔네 다 현다 숨디지 당하러 와 이걸 니 저베 잡나 이 넘버 잡나네 다 되려도요 봐 띵이다 셴도 남방에 쳔바나 여바 마이메 대다나야 때네 딱 봐samla 장질루사게 뽑아와 줄루사 오발루사 강가 추진바다 추와 추진바스니 추 루니 추냐도 그러와 근데 추추와서 추추야라서 봐 롱어 교와데 찡원 섬에서 왔을 때네 딱 봐samla 자와서 되고와래서 이 오마 tenju에 계셔래서 세송바다라서 야 티버트실
So then we turn to with mirror dependent imputation, functionality is feasible. So here for these essentialists, they would say that, well, if something is just like a mental imputation, there's no possibility that it can function. If we just talk about things as being merely dependently designated, for them, they don't understand how there could be functionality within that. But here, just as explained above, in this Prasangika system, when you apply the five-fold analysis of sameness, difference, and so forth to the basis of imputation of, for example, a pitcher, a bulbous portion, the spout, and so forth, you see that the pitcher does not exist. So here again, when one investigates in this kind of whether it's five-fold analysis or seven-fold analysis, beginning with looking at, well, is the thing designated the same as the basis of designation, or is it something that is different in the sense of being inherently different, unconnected? If it existed as something in its own right, existed by its own nature or inherently, then we would have to be able to find it. However, a proponent, so we see that it does not exist. There is no inherently existent pitcher, for example. However, a proponent of the Prasangika system is able to posit by mere imputation on the basis of imputation, a bulbous portion and so forth, this basis, we can impute a pitcher, and then a pitcher, they are able to impute a pitcher that is able to perform the functions of holding and pouring water and so forth. So even though one, when you do this kind of analysis, comes to the conclusion that there is no inherently existent pitcher, by being merely dependently designated, like whether it's a pitcher or a chariot or whatever it may be, we can talk about a chariot taking people or buying a chariot and so forth. They are able to function. And so essentialists do not know how to posit this. For them, there must be something found when they engage in that kind of analysis. And so to posit functionality, merely dependently designated phenomena, this is said to be an amazing and exclusive feature of the Prasangika Madhyamaka system. And then Chandrakirti states in his commentary on the 400 stanzas, his commentary to Aryadeva's 400 verses or 400 stanzas, that a pitcher and so forth are not found to exist on application of the five-fold analysis to determine whether they are one with their cause, as in their basis of imputation, or other than their basis of imputation. So we could do the five-fold analysis or add Chandrakirti's two extra, the mere collection and arrangement of the parts, and try to find that whether that thing that has been designated is the same as its basis of designation. Nonetheless, even though it's not found upon such analysis, as dependent imputations, they are capable of such functions as holding and dispensing honey, water, milk, and so forth. How amazing is this? So even though one, may apply the seven-fold analysis or the five-fold analysis to a pitcher, trying to find that thing, and you can't actually find it, well, that pitcher, the thing that is just merely designated as a pitcher, is able to dispense water and hold water and so forth. And how amazing is this? And this is the distinctive, really amazing feature of the Prasangika system.
Oh yeah, this one. Oh, that and that the Hakokwe Karadosana. De Kasura. Eki Kebatsula Sunzurish Niyokudwa. Oh, Tindi Tanda de Tatinda to the Chebachiti. Rangwene Drube, Rangwe Tade Yona. The Rangwe Tade, that's any Raya Yokurwa. Tina and Tadeta, Pumbuda, Rangwe Chikdu Yorda, Rangwe Pekagachani Yores, the Chebachidwa. Oh, any Tigalia, Chida Tade Nidil Pachina, Tangada Tatin to the Shadachin Chigidwa, and I chick to Tresera. Tade, Rawachiona, Rangitashi Pumbuda, the Badrubi Chikdom, Rawe Chikdom, Rawe Tade to Kabayose, Rawe Chikduyone, Tada, and a Pumbuni Chirugora, and Mardo. Oh, Yana Rawe Tade Duyana, Pumbuda, Tani Pe, Rawe Tade Duyana, Dremete Shere, and the Pumbi Chawacheba, the Tagi Chawacheba, so Jurkumarwa. Until Mambuki share or the Shannon to go on Nisha. Or the Rawad to be Tati Yona. And it Rawad is chick to Yota, Pumbutara Tade to use. In the Chebachin. And the Tati and the Chedi Rawad to be. And it was Boo, Tala Temba, Ta Pumbula Temba, the Medu Tatina, Rawad Tario Mare, some Kumgoyara. Oh, Keba teacher, which to the tissue Tayoda. It's all daughter balloon. I am Keba Kajati, Tandamla Chebese, Ramatu Trupake Seu Marese, Tadi Yomarese, Tadi Yona Kabayorese, Sobude Damare, Sem Damar, Todamar, the Shitamare, Chidu Yomar, Tade Yomarese, Tadi Mendoza Comshana Dures. Mendoza Yana Yungudo was no thing around Matabure, men and now young Samsa. What they come to do this on Chigara. Until young Kabakacha Sonatanda, Regina Tanya de Shidu, they say. Tanya Yebeta, Pumbosuda Tiras or Tishigore. He never shadu, they say. Oh, that young Kabashanda Sonate. Tandamla Chebet, Tanya to you, they Shishaku, they say. Never comes and to they say. 이 꼼샤나코 요마르시 네아치 차요고도나 다 규모다브레샤 메신도 나용고도 삼사 근데 또 소주면라요라 나 돈다 디네시체나 랑와도 주베다 요나세 아까바요세 제고레 타니도 여발라 제네 니고 말에 제네 땅고 삼레 샤고로 지dengi 타니데 제게 되나니 라고 말에 제 샤야 용 말에 지dengi 타니도 여마에데 제고 말에 마다 마제바셰 지dengi 타니 카트라바나시 차셰를 때는 파밍다 또베다 보나시 샤기르마도 다데 카그레스네 제나니 타니 샤토 말 타니 남샤 샤토 말 타니 tel라 넘버 제메 자세 라운드 두바체네 다 제바체네 카바요세 라윈네 요나타 코 카그레세 제니 녜요 브로티 케바데 치오라 이치 랍잖아 근데
So here, this is really important to understand. This is a crucial kind of a point. There are different sort of ways in which we can investigate and analyze, beginning with the kind of two extremes. Like if we have the self and the aggregates, we can investigate, well, are the self and the aggregates one and the same thing, or are they sort of different? If something exists from its own side, if it exists in and of its own right, then it has to be found. We have to be able to establish it through these kinds of modes of analysis. If the self and the aggregates have existence in their own right, then they have to be like exactly the same, or are they sort of different and unrelated? So then we can expand this kind of analysis, get into it more deeply by going through the five-fold analysis or the seven-fold analysis. But it begins really with these two. Wherein, according to the Prasangika Madhyamikas, they would say that, again, if something exists in and of its own right, it would have to be findable in this kind of analysis. And if it were the case that the self and the aggregates were, say, exactly the same thing, there would be certain faults that would incur, like being multiple selves and so forth. Or if they were inherently sort of other or unrelated, there would be other faults. Like if our aggregates do something, we can't say, I'm doing that thing, because they're totally established as different entities in their own right. And so there is no self that exists from its own side, but yet we can talk about the kind of inherent, the dependently designated existence of these things as mere imputations. And so Je Lama Tsongkhapa and his spiritual sons, as well as coming from the kind of tradition of Chandrakirti, use this type of analysis to negate, to refute any sort of inherent existence in and of its own right, but it really doesn't undermine that level of dependent designation, being mere imputations and so forth. So this is the kind of understanding that comes about from those masters. But there are others who, when they go through this kind of analysis and they say, well, the self isn't the aggregates, it's not other than the aggregates, it doesn't possess the aggregates or support, it isn't supported by them and so forth, and therefore it's not existent. There's nothing that can be found. And so for them, they understand this to conclude that the self is kind of non-existent. When something does appear, it's like an illusion in that it's appearing, but it doesn't exist. So if something exists for them, it's sort of again, like an illusion in the sense that it is appearing, even though it doesn't really actually exist. For them, that leads to a different kind of understanding that really has undermined conventional existence. They are denying conventional existence in the sense that, well, because nothing was found upon this kind of analysis, it doesn't actually exist. Now, for Tsongkhapa and others who are really Prasangika Madhyamikas, they would say that conventional existence is actually posited in the absence of analysis. When you investigate using this kind of ultimate analysis, you can't posit any sort of ultimately existent, inherently existent self from its own side. But in the absence of such analysis, we can posit all conventional phenomena as merely dependently designated, and they function in that way.
Oh yeah. On there da. Kunzu meji ji tsama yeme taba sedra. Ta tsama yoda me sera. Kunzu judan sheja dil ni yora. Kunzu temba da tandam temba ni yora. Kunzu temba sena sutra tero reshala soba. Yesu samal kunzu temba segra. Ye karse gorasana. Rang na ngusum delia. Na wata du matuge. Rang na ngusum tesolia. Rang na ngusum lia. Rangwene truba nage. Rawa du truba nage. Che shecha tesola kunzu temba segore. Rang na ngusum delia. Nangarazo pumba kawa kansa teso nangirwa. Sutra tero reshala soba. Mishi ta washi teso nangira. Nandi zako rawan du truba nangiware. Teso nawa nashi temba yomare. Zumba re teora, nawa nashi temba mesa. Rang nawa ngusum dela nawa tatu temba mesa, zumba. Tanya temba, kunzup temba sigor telia. Ta tongba nyesina rangwene truba tongba asina. Ti ngusum du tongge pakbe nyamsha isidirwa. Tila ko nawa tatu tongba nyete rang ngusum du togbe ngusum la nawa tatu temba re teora. Tila tondam temba sigore. Tondamba. Pakbe nyamsha isisi ti ngolo nawa nashi temba re teora. Shenda tuzu kanga kunzu mishi la soba ngusum teso la nawa nashi temba re yomara. Nangdu rawa du truba nangi ware. Neya la rawa du truba ne yomara. Tongba nyete rawa togbe ngusum la nangdu sa nawa nashi temba re teora. Rangwini truba nangi yomarwa. Rangwini truba tongba nangi wara. Oti sonza tondam temba ase. Rang nawa ngusum tela nawa tatu temba sonza tondam temba ase. Tongba nyete la sigora. Rang nawa ngusum tela nawa nashi temba mete kunzup temba sigore. Sutra tiru re chala soba. Rawa, tesu kanga kunzup temba sigore. Oti indi taya keba tsuge. Tondam kunzup mechi ki tsama yawa ma re se. Kunzup te zumba rawa se. Zumba sigdo ase. Kunzup se. Chashe kunne zuba se. Chashe tsangma ne zumba re sigore. Chazang nawa nashi meba se zumba re teora. Indi ko mego re se. Ko zumba rawa se. Zumba ine yungu ma rawa se. Temba de yogo re bade zumba de yongshik ma re se. Kunzup mechi ki tsama yawa ma re se. Tanya be tuandu tu tsame truba ma re se. Tundamli chebe che se ora. Tundamli chebe che. Tanya mechi ki tsama tuzu. Tanya 군주 쳐도서 미베 참아요 맞대 제주 말해서 가라 개발카지에서는 대 제주 샤워를 다세 세면 또 그래 그 자와지 통계지 요아와 담반이가 제주를 샤워를 시 담반이 있어라 군주 담바다 담담담반이 람탑시 니 있어라 담담담바 동계게 동반이 공개될 시럽기 차대로 군주들의 잠바다 니지 집바다 주름이 서바 삼del라 서바테서 군주 담발 담바들이 되어라 람델라 탑도 시럽니 있어 동반이디 담담담바데 또바데 시럽기 차대요 거라 네 군주 되면은 네 심제 동에게 나로요 말에 네 집바 동아데 집바 친구예요 말에서 서바 고메다 때서 매우 차요라 시 담반이 있어 람탑시니 있어 담담도 배 또 시럽게 차대 또 시럽 담담도 바데 시럽게 또 시럽게 또서도 시럽시로라 잠바다 니지 짐바다 주름이 서바 셈라 때서 간가 군주 유튜브 체부터 줄라 이러와가 그 담담도 시트 때바니 람탑시니 탑대로 탑지 차선에 상부 차들라 짐바다 주름다 서바다 와 잠바다 닌지다 장주고 셈세도 탑지차서 상부차대 시점반이 남탑신이 시럽셔야 돼 동반이 또바 메타바 또바라서 시럽니도 와 어쩌다 시점반이 남탑신이 있어 드레북군이 있어 동반이 또바라 때문에 주고 이시 주고다 원이고 산계기 시자 탐제 캠베 캠바다 쬐세베 세바디 쪽이어라 외국군에서 탑기 차대 짐바다 주름다 서바 잠바니 제 자주 sem라서 바데 산계게 수구디 두고래 소푸숨 서바샹라 최던 탑게게 수기 수구 남바체 산계 좀 된다 보대 짐바다 주름다 서바다 삼대다로 잠바다 닝지다 된데 공부할 때네 아니 구수푸숨 서바 수기 꾸디 좀네 샹라 최던 발에 서바티 요거라 어제단디 탑지 차대 군주 템발에 템베 탑지 차대 개sem보를 해서 이면은 아니 탑지 차대를 껴시그리 잡아다 닝지대 심정원의 매배 소리 지나는데 심정 닝지 공부대 총조해서 차기라 나티 니가 야부샤고 그래서 뒤송거라 근데 동가바 군주 소야 됐더래 그래서 들려 군주 매지기 참아 요르다요 말해서 이셰거다 어디지 랍나
So, here then we turn to, does a valid cognition observe conventional phenomena? So, here, when it comes to like what is valid knowledge and understanding, I mean, generally we can talk about two objects of knowledge, the kind of conventional truths and ultimate truth. And so, something that appears to like our visual consciousness, a form or sound that appears to our audio consciousness. So when those things appear, like vases and pillars and the person and so forth, they appear as though they were really truly established, as though they had this kind of existence in their own right. They directly appear to us like that. And so in that way, they are false, as in they don't actually exist in the way that they appear. Again, this does not mean that they are totally non-existent, but these various conventionalities, they're only sort of true to the perspective of that conventional understanding. And this is sometimes called truth for a concealer, in the sense that this has the sense of concealing the actual nature of phenomena, whereas ultimate truth, it is something that is it appears only to the meditative equipoise of an Arya, of a superior being within that direct meditative equipoise on emptiness. And this is as it appears, as in that lack of inherent existence is the truth for the perspective of that kind of ultimate consciousness, or that wisdom realizing emptiness. So the conventional phenomena do not exist in the way that they appear. Again, they appear to us to have that kind of existence in their own right, their sort of inherent existence. And but they are true to that perspective of conventional existence or sort of a conventional consciousness. And so here, when it comes to the kind of conventional are all of the various objects that appear to our senses and so forth, they appear to have this kind of existence in and of their own right, but they are mistaken with respect to that. That doesn't mean that they are totally non-existent. Now, we often talk again about the importance of sort of having the basis of the two truths, the path of method and wisdom that then results in the two Buddha bodies. So having a foundation that includes a correct understanding of conventional truth, what it means for things to exist conventionally, as well as ultimate truth. It is on the basis of understanding these that we are able to practice the two elements of the path, the wisdom side of the path primarily coming through our investigation of ultimate truth, although this can include realizations or understanding of impermanence and so forth. And the conventional truth side leading us to engage in those method side practices. So without that, we wouldn't observe sentient beings, suffering sentient beings, and engage in generosity and the various perfections and so forth. So it is that kind of understanding of conventional truth, of that truth for a concealer, that method side, the side of goodness, developing love and compassion, the six perfections, that will in turn lead to the accomplishment of the form body of a Buddha. The two resulting bodies come from, and we can really speak about Buddhahood being encompassed by the extinction of all faults and the development of all good qualities, which are embodied in the truth body and the form body. And the form body, what we use to then teach others, is dependent upon our cultivation of that method side in order to develop the kind of compassion for sentient beings who are tormented by sufferings and engage in the activities like generosity and so forth. But it is our understanding of ultimate truth, that wisdom side, that brings about the truth body of a Buddha. And so thereby we need to have both of these together, an understanding of the foundation of the two truths, conventional and ultimate truth, a path that includes the practice of wisdom and method that then will result in the two Buddha bodies.
Oh yeah. Anga jude kunju michi gi chema yeme ta ba sigora. Chitan chema sede. Yuji milu e sheba chila chema sigora. Milu e sheba. Chema dige to na shi. Kasa dige tina shi cheba ine kulua meba. Ro. Ene tore ji tonsuna pege meba da sabaina. Ko tada pege chako ko ina kar mechi ko ina droshana. Ibuti lua yo maro ngone ra tole yorba. Milu e sheba chila chema sigora. Ya wangbo ta. Miki wangbo la soba su te zula chema shawi yo mare. Namba chena. Chiruba to miwa nawa to sule chema shage yora. Chema se te kar ko resana. Ibu langdo lan jube tu so chiko yora. Ibu koe de tsutuge mego de pasha pemba de neba karete ne. Ni ya chene dragi ti milu e sheba chiko yora. Ibu langdo lan jube tu so chinge. Ro. Milu a chiko yora. Yute rangi samyan jinge ki yute manora chiko yora. Nor sunane nor chikaga nodo ro. Tangbutela milu e sheba chiko yora. Sheba chi de yute milu a cheje ngone che temba chin jinge na. Tele tene yute sejure tane sheba mambo chama mambo kewa. Shirabo kanga ya yore. O tiri samane. Yula namba mendra washa yun rambendra kanga tene shen tugirwa. Kanga nonjo chayina sheba kanga norde yune nora mato chube chamato yogu marwa. Sheba sete yuji tochila miluwe sheba. Ibu langdo la jube yu so yinge. Seshi rikwa. Yu seshi riktunge. Yu tila miluwa yinge. Roa. O tinte chigi yuna ini yu tokwe sama paro ma shirishingure. Tangbune nonjo chayine nora chamato yogu mato. Miluwe sheba chi sula chama yogu mare. Chama sete yinchi michi ku yu rakpa dan chamo kanga lian jutunge. Deba chinsange samlutan tunge. Maungba yonjula samlutan tunge. Tata wae tunge. Roa. Miki sheba nawe sheba tozo tata karine ti tungir mato. Kiri samlutane Mahobadan Devatan Tazus, or a share your matter. Or Tidiko, Sama settle Melu Sheba. Ibulandu and Jube, you saw Yenge. Yeah, you chill a Meluachi Chigiana. Teletan and Samlatane, Mambungazu, how good Langdurgine and Pejain and Shanda Karina, and Dachi, Abushin Sona. Yurejine Gaga Kanga said, Katachi, Abushin Sona. Shanda Kanga Shin got to Sara de Kare and de Kamare, de Ere, Biri, de Marin, de Reshe and Gotura. Any Kanga Shin, you Ganga to lawyer at a chain, and that Kanga Shaya and Dragora. Tambune Miloa Chiga Machina and Dragomato, Tibulandula Jube, you saw Yenge. Yes, she request Shiba Yenge. Dava the Mahoma, the Tada Kanga Juto. In the Miwan Nawato, Samashagmar, Nambachana. Chiruba in Miwan Nawato, the Samashangayora. Oh, Samasudu Little Cigarettes, still up to China.
So, on this section of does a valid cognition observe conventional phenomena, we first need to understand what is a valid cognition. And so here, this is referring to an unerring, kind of undeceiving consciousness. So, for example, if we see smoke over there, we can conclude that, oh, there's fire. And that is a undeceiving kind of a mind. So when it comes to valid cognition, for Buddhists, they would say that our powers, our like sense faculties cannot be valid or invalid, but rather it is the sense consciousnesses. So we have our 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness, and valid cognition is what acts as a cause for our engagement with what we should do and our abandonment, avoidance of what we shouldn't do. So it is based upon having that kind of incontrovertible or undeceiving consciousness of something that we are then able to say, oh, this is what I should do, this is what I shouldn't do, and engage in that kind of practice. So this mind, a mind is clear and knowing, and a kind of consciousness that is not going to lead us astray, that will not be deceptive. This is what is a valid consciousness. So if we have a false or kind of wrong, a deceptive understanding as our basis, then we're going to go astray right from there. Instead, we want to have as a basis the kind of consciousness that is incontrovertible, that is not leading us astray. And so this sort of, whether it is a past, a consciousness of something that happened in the past, when it comes to our sense powers, our sense consciousnesses, they're really in the present. They don't remember the past or think of the future. But our minds, our mental consciousnesses can think of the past, the present, the future, and so forth. If we have a correct understanding, something that is incontrovertible, that is undeceiving, then we can begin to understand better and better, improve that kind of understanding. But if we are wrong from the start, or our basis is deceptive, like if we don't learn the letters properly, there's no way that we can proceed then to read. But if we have a correct understanding of the letters, we can then get the understanding of the words, and we can develop it more and more. So here, again, although there are non-Buddhists that assert the validity of powers, like our sense faculties, for Buddhists, valid is only really in relation to the cognition, the consciousness.
Oh, yeah, I do. Kuzu Michi gets some of your metabas. Doles, Sanjay Duke of Sungudwa. Nita Nawa Naya Chama Miss. Big on one eye on one nail on Buchela on Bola Soba. Sushin about the Surwa. The Liki Wambola Soba to Sama Mares and Gora. Oh, Chiritama Mares. A Sebjan Chama means to do. There's a Neluto Besse. Nita Nawa Nata Cheda. Society which is similar so but as well. And then Nelu let Sama Mares. Nelu Tadutele, Rangi, Toatela, Toachita was in the Toana Shitsama Mares. Get the one boat that say in answer. Get the one bull la Sobongazu Sheba to Kanga. Now and I sit and budget Sama in answer. Pabelam Jusula Chishi Charles. And if Tombanila Sobatazo Congo Mares. And to Sheba now and I see. Ngoyu nesu le temperature yiba ina songora sigora oh tina karsora 아주 시바가 통하는 신내로 타도 통하려는 거라. 미다 나와 나당 아주 sem기 삼반나시 강가때 버려는 거라. 아주 삼반나시 대바이나 네 양당 betön 째고야 요 말에서 거라. 나랑 저 양당 betön 강가 통되요. 내로 치마 치신 통되요. 근데 박베람 내로 타도디 가리 바하 공개게 박베람 토베치도 배수 치고야 요 말에서 거라. 이등 아주 통하나시 대바 요 말에 삼반나시 따다 대요 말에서 쓰요도. 약간 박벨람 지술에 지시하시다. 네. 나와도 오만 주발에 장세. 남근 직대 재미도 예시스. 직대 배시바도 강가. 네 랑게 통하나시 정말 밀로에 참아 말해서. 남근 직대 재미도 예시스. 대 고난일에 참아 매서서 다들 남바군도 직대 랑가 와서 가서 통하되 뭐고 고난게 내로 치마 지신 통에 참아 말해서. 시 미글라 속바 왕부 수신 남다세 직된베 미실라 속바 남자 미와다 미와라 템베 숙시베 미실라 속바 와 예신도 나와치와 류와세 강가 자주라 남자 체마 많이 버 송신세 루루지 자와시럽지 쳐주도 단데도 체마 매세데 담마시 올리오그래 내루래 체마 많이세 고통하나시 따다 말해서 통한에서 따다 에네 랑게 뭐 내로 치마 지신 통하래 두어라 뭐 내로 치마 지신 통해 참 말해서 자와시럽 비춰줘도 관계 떼진 레버를 줘서 각반 매번 깨매번 세번 매번 담아 오만 매번도 다들 되면 주반이 시대 봐서 도배사님은 담바들 찾을 때 줘라 관계 떼진 레버를 줘서 주단 깨라 떼지 델네 좋아 낚시다 차셔라 떼네 딱배 떼진 레버를 좋아 그봐 낚시다 도시게 다니엘라 떼진 레버를 좋아 떼들을 니고 줘라 주단 깨라 떼진 레버를 좋아 싱그리시 땀나 사비오다 추다 류토솔라 떼진 델네 네 사비 뉴공가 뭐야 깨고도 주단 깨라 떼진 대단 드네 이 조치기 대단 드네 드블게 이 대신 드블 좋아지시기도 아야 강바이네다 강사이네다 신도이네다 그런 그 차시함 덕실을 때네 네 신도를 네 가와를 네 강바를 네 강사를 네 다른 네 방아를 봤다 그러봐 이 덕시다 덕실을 때네 딱 봤더라 대신 드블 좋아스 때네 딱 뱉던지다 때네 때네 깨뱉던지다 때네 딱 뱉던지 신이용 것도 야 여전히 관계 땡지 레버를 줘서 관계 좀 되는 관계 땡지 레버를 줘서 받아서 각바 매봐서 근데 박배 냠샤의 시기 세주나 시자네 그 제거라 박배 냠샤의 동반 인구 숨도 식배 박배 시기 올이야 각바요 말에 껴와요 말에 채바요 말에 따바요 말에 와요 말로요 지단 다대요 말에서 군주배 좁았어요. 군주배 좁아다. 라완도 좁에 각자 나와서 좁아 탐제실에 똥반장마도요 말했어요. 전달아. 네. 각바세인데 계셔야 될 가래서는 뭐 랑원에 여바 마와서 주생게 쪼 랑원에 여바 주생게 쪼들이야. 깨운 것도 와서 주단 깨게 쏘 깨운 것도 와서 주단 깨지 마사도 판 지르고도 와서 라완게 지르고 그래서 네 딱바다 로 균체바다 균마체베체 딱바 내발라 써봐 열릴 때 랑원에 두고야 돼. 와 유진의 지도 영향도 와서 진의 질판 로엔도 와서 롱라 써봐 대수 때네 여사 랑원도 두고 요고래서 근데 뭐 찍으러 봐서 니나 니를 봐서 찍다 다대라 써봐 그래서 강가 랑원에 두고 예배 주생게 쪼전에 고주 송 주시게 와래 그래서 대수 강가 라완도 주바요 말에 연나 박배 냠샤시게 라완도 여바 시고 그러데 시게 말에 똥바시기도 하시고 와라 가바 매바 깨 매바시도 뭐보 고랑게 뭐 핀디기 차네 뭐보 간데시나 고랑 어디야 헬스도 깨와데시고라 립스도 직도 와들시고라 뭐 핀디기 완도 전에 깽가니 시게 와라 와 Cheba meba tang meba sido gaba meba ke meba te che ngo pindi go do che ne yenga ni she do cheba meba tang meba se gyun gi che ne ro gyun cheba gyun ma cheba che tak ba ne ba tende meba se ora yu le to de dong ni se ora yu ji ne ji no wa se de ne pan dro so se ro de she de yu le to de dong ni se dāla tūdhīs kō rōgwa lā tūdhīs chīk tā tātā nī yu nī rōgwa yorwa, chīk yu nī rōgwa mē rōwa dā sīk rā, dāo sīk tā rōgwa chīk tā tātā nī sī, wā tī Geshe ādi tī rā chūpa nī shī sī, kunzu bē chūpa Thabkhe Phakpa nyamshā yī shī kī ngō lā yō mā rī sūng duwā sī rā tēnchī Drepung chūngā kāngā tī Phakpa nyamshā yī shī kī sī ngō lā yō mā rī sī wā tī pa tī chī lām nā tāmbō, wā dā yī sī rā.
So here, then from the King of Concentration Sutra, it says, the eye, ear, and nose consciousnesses are not valid cognizers. The tongue, body, and mental consciousnesses are also not valid cognizers. If these sense consciousnesses were valid cognizers, of what use to anyone would the noble being's path be? So here, if our conventional, like our sense consciousnesses, and here again, we're as opposed to those non-Buddhists who assert that sense faculties and the powers can be valid or not. Even the sense consciousnesses here are not completely correct. If they were absolutely correct, if our sense consciousnesses and mental consciousness perceived objects exactly as they existed, then there would be no point in anyone trying to pursue the noble being's path of trying to get rid of some sort of fault or develop their mind. If it were the case that the visual sort of faculty, or sorry, the visual consciousness were completely valid with respect to its object as well, then it wouldn't be necessary for us to pursue this kind of noble path. So Chandrakirti states in his Entering the Middle Way, the world is not valid in any way, as in the way that we normally see things is not sort of asserted to be valid cognition. Thus, it is said that the physical sensory faculties, the eye and so forth, so again, those are definitely not valid. But the sensory consciousnesses as well of worldly persons, the visual consciousness and so forth, are not valid cognizers, as in they don't actually realize the way that things completely exist. And so Nagarjuna states in the opening homage of his fundamental verses on the Middle Way, I bow down to the perfect Buddha, the best of teachers, who taught that whatever is dependently arisen is unceasing, unborn, unannihilated, not permanent, not coming, not going, without distinction, without identity, and free from conceptual elaborations. So here, whatever sort of comes about due to causes and conditions. Now we're able to sort of understand a level of that, although phenomena appear to us to, again, exist in their own right, as if they had this kind of inherent existence in and of themselves. But whatever it is that arises is dependently arisen, as in it's dependently originated in the sense that it comes about due to causes and conditions, as well as the fact that it is dependently designated. There is this dependence between the basis of designation and the thing which is designated on that. We also have the relationship of like the parts and the whole. So here, when we are talking about something like a house or a chariot, a tree, a person, any of these things, although they appear to exist in their own right, they are dependent originations in the sense of the parts and the whole having this kind of relationship, the cause and effect relationship, as well as the process of dependently designating them. They don't exist in and of themselves. And so here, according to, as it says here, whatever is dependently arisen is unceasing, unborn, unannihilated, not permanent, not going, not coming, not going, without distinction, without identity, and free from conceptual elaboration. So here, according to the perspective of meditative equipoise, that is realizing or observing emptiness, there are no conventional elaborations. There is no sort of coming or going, annihilation or permanence, and so forth. There's only that kind of emptiness that is arising to the perspective of that meditative equipoise. But if these kinds of things existed, inherently, like if it were the case that like the essentialists want to do, they assert an inherently existent cause, well then is that cause the same with its result, or is it totally different from its result? If it existed in this kind of inherent way, in the way that it appears to our conventional consciousnesses, then when we engage in investigation and analysis, it should be findable. But the sublime wisdom of a noble being in meditative equipoise doesn't sort of take any of these conventional objects. It doesn't observe any of those kinds of things like coming and going and so forth. It only is perceiving the ultimate nature of all phenomena.
Oh yeah, demand lotion.
Mm.
Che tenje debar jo chu namje kewa dang gaba dang ro dang wa la soba. Kunzu be chu tu kanga. Habe nyamsha shi ke sigme songdo ase. Ne kunzu be tanye be chema ta le longmang bu chang so me ta na wa na chema mes. Te zu ge to me do ase. Yin de kunzu be chu tu yo ba ma re se go ra. Tanye be chema da to dang be chema mi chi ge chema kang ge jang ma mi shi. Chu de da yo ba ma yin no se. Tanye be chu kunzu be chu tu yo ba ma re cheme chu ba ma re se. O di sung ge ke ba chen de ba de she go ra. Che na se ta ti ma re se o te go ra ho ti ba to chi la sha na. De do.
So here we'll go through just this last little bit. So there's a sort of assertion by others that say that, well, the sublime wisdom of a noble being, an Arya, in meditative equipoise does not see or take as its object conventional phenomena, which are the elaborations of production and cessation of dependently arisen phenomena. Thus, conventional phenomena are not observed by either conventional valid cognition or valid cognition that observes the ultimate. Therefore, these phenomena do not exist. So here, the assertion of these other kinds of scholars is that they don't exist at all, based upon those kinds of quotations that were given above. They would say, well, there's no conventional valid cognition, and if they don't exist either to that kind of ultimate valid cognition, this valid cognition that is observing the ultimate nature of phenomena, then therefore these things, these phenomena don't exist at all. So I guess we're going to have to leave it with that proposition by the other.
Oh yeah, that is.
So, Rinpoche, thank you so much for these teachings. They've been incredibly valuable to us. And during this period now where we won't have the teachings, we will definitely reflect on them. The reason that this is the last class for this series is because 5 of the residents of the Abbey, the Shikshamanas, are going to Taiwan to receive Bhikshuni ordination. And then somebody's going as a translator and someone is also going as a witness. So because so many people were gone, we thought not to have the teachings to end, to wait until they're back. Do you want to translate that?
Genla ani sungche di naya la tukchena seriores ani nekap chikla bharsam shagore kareresene konso gelong getsoma dun di gelong ma dompa lembe chedu Taiwan la pegirwa.
Oh yeah.
아니 다와치기 링라 콘소 요마레 아니 다 숭슈 요마레 이네 마음바 무투네 숭슈 나야기 레와 요레스.
나야. 야고도 나서서. 하고.
Yeah. So, but we definitely want to continue with the teachings in May when everybody is back. So thank you so much for agreeing to continue.
니간가 수 용두 nganso yangkyar 숭슈 고츠나 야포레 레와 요레 레와 무투네 디체 데바 슈크샴보 요레스.
뭐야.
And thank you, Katrina, for
야고도.
translating so far and agreeing to continue in May.
We look forward to it.
Okay, so we'll offer now.
야.
This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland sun and moon. Imagine as moon and land and offer to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Loseling's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratnam. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
야.
투체나 한게나.
야.
여러분 지금
Record.
한쪽에